Hello and welcome to SPWK TV here 2025. Today we are going to be talking about the intersection of Martech and data integration. And with me I have Russell, Yehoshua and Zorin.
Yes.
Welcome. So gentlemen, if we go through one at a time, Russell, you are now the proud co-founder of some marketing technology, is that correct? Do you want to give us a bit of a background on your journey?
Yeah, so my name's Russell McAthy. I'm CEO and co-founder of Ringside Data. We're a marketing data platform, so that combines web analytics using our own tracker and pulling data from loads of different sources. And before that, I was a marketing consultant for a decade. So working with big companies and helping them mainly use data at the heart, but then help them improve what they're doing in the marketing space.
Nice, thanks Russell. And Yehoshua,
Yeah.
Ninja as well, right? And first time on SPWK TV. Thanks for, it's such an honor to have you.
Thank you.
And host of SPWK for the last 10
years or something like that.
10 years. Give us a bit of a background about your world and data.
So I work, we have a small consultancy named Analytics Ninja. And background, I don't know, background was from SPWK.
Right.
Coming here, talking about tech management, talking about implementation, working with Google Analytics, and it evolved into building data warehouses and building data models and doing data activation. And so my own journey was very much frustration with a tool of Google Analytics that wasn't meeting needs from an analysis perspective. From a reporting perspective, it was sufficient. And in many ways, I still think is. But so that a lot moving into the cloud and working a little bit broader.
Yeah, no, thanks. And Zorin, agency founder and...
Yeah, and sitting right next to a ninja. So basically that's kind of a win-win for me. I basically lead a couple of smart people who know their stuff in terms of performance marketing. We are Google-centric, very much so. Maybe things will change in the future. It depends on what's going to happen on the market. There are shifts, many of them, present even historically. But our focus was basically on performance marketing and analyzing any kind of metric which can be improved or, let's say, set something about. The point is, we are target-based, basically, so we like to have targets, we like to deploy any kind of targets or think in ways of how to do some kind of a change. So activation is basically in our core. Any information that we hear, we try to use it against or for you, but we try to basically use it.
And Russell, you know, if we have a look at the last 10 years, if we use that as a, you know, you've come from a marketing consultancy side, we've seen kind of like data analytics and marketing technology move closer. Any insights that you can share in your journey? You've obviously seen that there's a need to fill the whole Martech space with a tool, right?
Yeah, I think the reason why we created Ringside was for exactly the issues that Joshua was saying, is that you need to do any advanced analytics. You have to have very granular data that you can trust. And going back 10, 15 years, we started with log file analysis and getting feeds from servers to say, this is what happened, and then aggregating that data. And we kind of went through that phase of when Google Analytics or Urchin launched, and then Google Analytics was created, and then Adobe Analytics came in with Omni as well. Like we saw that aggregation be passed on to businesses, and we lost some of the ability to do the smarter things. And with the emergence of cloud and being able to pull that data out and do analysis on that raw data again, I think that's the enabler that's allowed consultants to do the more smarter things that you can't necessarily do in the platform. And one of the things that we're trying to do at Ringside is take a lot of the heavy lifting of the aggregation part to enable those smarter things to be able to be done without having to rely so much on the other platforms in the market to do that innovation in the first place.
And Yehoshua, your relationship with like data, I suppose your strength is mainly with data, if I would say, and then coming across into using or integrating with marketing technology tools and platforms, this whole relationship of data coming in and going. How have you seen this evolving over recent years?
Well, I've seen with the evolution of technology, greater enablement for companies to be able to activate data. CDPs are more prevalent and more capable. Managing data flows through with server-side tag manager that includes real-time data enrichment is something that we can do now that I think that certainly wasn't happening at any reasonable scale just a few years ago. And so from the data perspective, I think it's easier to use data. Right? I'm not sure if I agree, even though like we do a lot of our work in the cloud for sure. I would like to be able to still see, and I think some platforms still do that well. Like data in the platform from an analytics perspective is really useful. It's a useful tool to do more than just reporting. Do actual analysis, run equations, numbers, and do some stats. So Adobe Analytics is they do that well. But that's not the same. Like the bigger space is how do I connect it usually to the vendor? And I think that probably that's something that you do a lot. Is okay.
Unfortunately, yes.
Huh? Unfortunately,
yes.
Yeah. But that's like a key piece. It's okay. The activation level of the data is either on the ad tech, we're sharing that data back to vendors so that there can be reach of marketing messaging. But it can also be more operational too. And the webhooks and server-side tracking and data flows, that's actually, for me, that's exciting to actually be able to touch that data more readily and instead of doing cron jobs.
And for you, Zorin, as a performance marketing agency, this whole relationship with the technology and the data, what you said, unfortunately, you're...
I mean, it's very romantic. It's like any relationship. It has its ups and downs, but the problem is there are high expectations on each side, basically. As said, you have vendors which have an expectation to increase, I don't know, budgets or whatever it is by showing better results inside the platform or overall kind of a success part. Then on the agency side, you have this kind of a push on implementing all sorts of things to enable activation, basically. So you have, for instance, I'm very intimate with Google in terms of their product base and what they require on the client side. And it's basically usually we need more. So more data, but in a different context. Now it's more real time. In the history, it was basically much easier to do these kinds of things, but now it becomes a bit more of a drag on multiple fronts. You have technology, that's the first part. Then you have business, that's the second part. Then the third part is the activation itself in terms of if we do this activation, what's going to happen next? So, but the activation part usually has to be in your core. And when you look at, I don't know, a data set, that's kind of the point on what you want to decide what to do with it. How to activate this, let's say, like a simple table, like a big table of something. User interactions, transactional data, whatever you have. But what am I going to do with it? I mean, having it's nice, like this suit, it's nice. But what to do with it later on, that's kind of the biggest question. And that's why consultants and everyone else can position themselves if they can easily map what you have to a certain activity that should yield some kind of a positive result in the end.
So if we talk about activation, if I was like from the marketing or product side of things, and I wanted to understand activation, is this purely in the paid media perspective space, or is there other areas that we should also be exploring?
Communications is huge.
Yeah.
So yes, building audiences and syncing audiences for the purposes of marketing reach is an important area of data activation. The second place would be communications. When to be able to message, and that's your SMS and your email, right? How do you actually communicate with the customer or the prospect based on things that might be happening in their data?
Yeah.
Right. So
I mean, are we truly there yet? I mean, because we see a lot of activation through ad tech, for example, and fine tuning that. But are we at a point where brands are actually smart with their emails, with their SMSs, with their even personalization on websites, right?
Yeah, I was going to say push notifications on websites or
Yeah.
through actual push notifications on app is reasonably common, especially if the tech stack that someone's using is joined up. Like, and this is what we've seen over especially the sort of last 5 years is in e-commerce land, if someone's on Shopify, you've got all these plugins that have that connectivity between different data sources. So there is a low implementation complexity that's needed to enable the sort of the first rung of that ladder, enabling people to be able to join those data sets together. I think when you're talking about doing things at scale, the ad vendors try to make it easy, and I try to make it easy to connect the data you have or the first party data you have to them to enable you to use that platform more. But I think one of the challenges that we face is that all of them are their own walled gardens and they all want their own identifiers. And the challenge is then for the brand and their partners they have in that space to provide the best solution that's right for that brand. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges right now is helping the brand understand what success actually looks like. It's not just doing more, it's where should they put their focus? Is it that they are still quite junior in their thinking of audience segmentation, but they should be doing more in direct mail and email more than they are in paid activity. And I think that that's one of the challenges that's going to become even more prevalent going forward.
There's also a consensus of performance marketing is kind of this, I call it a steroid hit. You know, it gives that initial result, but it kind of can lack in the longer term brand development, brand growth. For you, Zorin, is this something that you deal with? Because quite often you get the senior executives who say, wow, we had a 20% growth month on month. What did we do? Let's do it again. Are we looking at do we need a greater maturity from the brand side to ask the right questions, to put it more into the longer term strategy side of things?
I think we need a longer time slot to explain all of that. Yeah, but the question is on point, definitely. So from one side, performance is usually expected to deliver in short time with high yields, let's say. So you do something and it's basically always kind of a thing, a green thing in the report. So you did one activity and it's usually like you did something good. But it usually boils down to some kind of price action. That kind of a thing, because these two are usually tied.
Yeah.
Short-term effects, someone in the boardroom is happy, which is fine. That's like an open door to start something else with it. But on the mid-term to long-term, then branding comes into play. And branding comes into play, especially in terms of also the activation part, what Russell was saying with emails, direct messages of any kind. So direct communication, what you mentioned. Yeah. The quality of that, how you set it up, the orchestrational part, is also one part of the branding experience, basically, what the brand is. So if you mess this up, so you have this kind of a position, you have values, you have everything else, but your brand communication is off, basically. Timing, sentiment, or whatever it is, which is involved there, everything comes crumbling down. So no performance marketing will deliver any kind of a success unless it's, again, a price action on the other part. So these two things need to be combined. So audience segmentation, how are you segmenting? Based on preferences, based on RFM, based on some kind of value-based system, basically, which is, again, inclined to your brand and not basically to some kind of a best practice kind of thing. That definitely makes sense. When you do the communication or orchestration part, also, if you are doing any kind of a, let's say, luxury brand, you're probably not going to push it by push notifications every day. We have a discount, this, that, and it needs to be in context.
Yeah.
And when it's done in the proper way, it can create a long-term effect, basically. You are in line with what the brand communicates. The performance marketing part is just the utility that gets behind all of these like brand on the higher level activities, and then the performance takes all of these newly created demand or basically the existing demand and takes it home, like the end result.
So is there an opportunity to utilize your campaign data for longer term understanding or segmentation?
Definitely, because we need to understand who do we actually sell to. Yeah. Even if it's a short-term transactional result, we basically need to understand who did that. Is it a new customer which is tied to a specific, I don't know, a specific product or a specific concept, which is usually down to brand? Or is it an existing customer who is very repetitive and predictive, and it's basically just wasted money? In terms of
so even like a bad campaign, there's value in
yes,
learning from it. Yeah. Yehoshua, any thoughts on campaigns and on the data side? And
so I think it's on the campaign side, it's really important to think of, in many cases, human psychology, consumer psychology, that the messaging that is being put out, which let's say to attract the customer, because that's what marketing is trying to do, right? So the campaign messaging can be looked at in relationship to what is the value proposition on our platform, on our website, or in the app, etc. But what's the value proposition? Is the messaging that brought the user? Are they finding that we're meeting their need through the communications of the value proposition on the site? And that's something that's you can learn from. So for sure, like the nature of the not just to find out is the campaign performant or not, right? That's of course what we're doing with the performance marketing analytics is what's successful, but then understanding the psychology behind that and why it's successful can help shape the messaging on the website, help shape the messaging in the nurture of the. So at that point, we're moving a bit more into user research, customer research, the importance of the integration of qualitative data within that research. But for me, when you said campaign, the most important part is that it's people that are being exposed to a campaign. It's a person, right? And so if we can't lose sight of on the other side of that screen is a human, and that's really important.
And there's so many other unknown variables associated with that human, right? So that can often make it difficult. Now, if I can pull it into the marketing technology side of things, Russell, you've developed a tool, and if we're looking at, say, the whole implementation process for an organization, what are some of the things that they have to look at, particularly in regards to data, and also their level of maturity? Is there a time that we say, you're not ready just yet, or we need to do a lot more work beforehand?
Yeah, I think having a schema that is consistent. I think the key word here is consistency. Is we can onboard a website if they have a consistent naming convention, the data layer has all the variables that you would want to have. It takes 2 hours to onboard the website because everything is where it's supposed to be. That's unbelievably rare unless someone talented has already worked with that brand. So what actually is the sort of enemy of data integrity is a lack of consistency. And we see it very often. And it boils down to having naming conventions that you know that you want to have and use for a reasonable amount of time. And I think that a lot of brands have gone through a bit of a resurgence of trying to do that better when they had to re-implement GA4, because that is obviously one of the leading ones in the industry. And that has probably helped a bit in having some level of consistency, Although I imagine I can look to the gentleman to my right and they're both half nodding and half going, we find issues every day with implementations. And I think that that's the thing that we face very often is as much as when we come in, we're quite often taking over from someone who already has GA or Adobe implemented. And the challenge there is saying, okay, what has been set up that we're happy with the sort of the schema that's sitting there already?
Have that continuity from the old data to the...
Yeah, and then it's also where are the gaps that should have been addressed but never were, and where we want to have that incrementality combined with that consistency going forward, whether that be just about naming conventions or incremental data sets that should have been captured in that sort of initial engagement.
Now, Yehoshua, like a really good example is, we've seen a major product go through major changes. Don't need to mention the name there, but if we do look at Google Analytics 4, we have a new version of product which provides a whole lot of different challenges. We don't have what we had before. What would say the learnings that you would have from that moving forward? Do you have less trust in the technology vendors out there? Because it was kind of like a seismic shift in the landscape of a core tool, right? I mean, are you a bit more the wiser in evaluating tools before implementing them, what the long-term development is?
So I don't really think that Google Analytics that everyone was comfortable and familiar with was really such a actually very good tool. It's just that GA4 is from the user interface and is worse. So that makes it harder for less technical people and for marketers who were very familiar to actually just do the types of reporting that they would want. So it created a gap towards the engaging self-service on the tool. More to your question, I think that for a lot of companies that felt that they needed to migrate because the API is up, we have to migrate. I'm getting emails and banners when I log in. I guess we have to migrate. And so what that did allow is beginning to potentially do a rethink of like what Russ was saying of the naming convention from a event properties model. So Universal Analytics was weird-ish in the fact that it had scope of events, right? That's good that that's not there, that there's not separate event scope. So that's pretty fundamental. Like, I'm not going to downplay the fact that, well, moving from multiple types of event scope to actually just one type of event scope called event is downplayed. It is important, but it did give, I think, people a chance to think about it differently. Like, okay, I'm just going to think about events, and event-driven architecture. And the event-driven architecture mindset is something that's playing itself out in other areas of Martech and activation. It's using event-driven architecture to communicate, right? Using event-driven architecture to also to even share audiences, or create events that might trigger something on a marketing platform, bidding, things like that. So, a lot of companies are still use different event-driven architecture, Kafka streams and et cetera. But I think moving to an event-driven architecture for that's not weird for the Google Analytics 4 users did create an opportunity for companies to take stock and think about their integrations.
Well, Zorin, what do you see? We'll do the last round here of questions. What is the future of this whole data marketing technology world for performance marketing? We've got a lot of products out there coming and going.
Okay, now we are doing the prediction part.
Yeah.
Magic ball and magic
Next year
sauce.
Crystal ball.
we can tick off who was right and who was wrong.
So first of all, I'm expecting the GA5 to come around, I don't know, next year or whatever it is. So GA4 was not only a new version upgrade or whatever it was kind of a big shift, which was not really understood by the majority of users, which were basically introduced to something that they didn't even think about scopes before. And now they said, okay, there is no scope, there is just events, basically, or hits or whatever it is inside. Okay, and what to do with that? And then analytics and the Google product team probably, they made this kind of a series of decisions to apply the old logic of reporting basically to the new GA4. So you have the sessions, you have these conversion rates. And it was a big struggle basically because the conversion rates came later on down the road. And in the like old school CRO, e-commerce or whatever it is, in performance world, the conversion rate was one of the, let's say, key metrics for something. And it was not exposed there. You had to do a couple of rounds of exercises to get to a very important metric for a mainstream tool, which was quite strange, to start with.
Nice way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I had so many questions.
It was odd.
Yeah.
Like, how do I measure conversion rate in my tool?
Is it user conversion rate, session conversion rate? Is it? It's a headache, which never ends basically because it's always refreshed in some way. The future, what it's going to bring, especially for performance part, some of the roles are definitely going to change. Now we already have tools which basically go through the rows set of, I don't know, BigQuery export and then basically tell you a story in a very human, narrated way, like you're listening to an audiobook. You did this, users did that, the humans did this particular set of actions. It changes over time, so seasonality, anomaly detection, whatever it is. But it exposes things that usually analysts did. You know, the anomaly detection part, the seasonality part, any kind of change, trend, velocity, frequency, whatever it is. And it makes it human in a human-readable format. So it's not like tables, it's basically a narrative of some kind. Is it good? Yeah. Does it hallucinate? Definitely. But humans do as well. Yeah. So that kind of thing does not change.
And also, what about performance marketing through the AI platforms?
There are multiple things that are now happening, and this is kind of the end of last year. This year was the kind of the first thing that I noticed that actually AI was used in performance marketing. Everything else was just MVPs of some kind. You know, everyone was tickling with images, with copy, with sentiment, and everything like that. But it was only as a proof of concept. Can it be done? Yeah. Now we can see it in production terms. I mean, high localization, effort scaling on a massive level, which with high quality visual results, which was always the issue. You know, people with 6 fingers or whatever it was. It was hallucination of some kind. The quality improved, the efficiency improved, the application scope also improved. So it's not only just copy, it moves all around. And what you can see is that the usual suspects, basically the old school performance people, are going to shift roles into more consulting part. It was also the story before, but now it's more prominent. Why? Because one single person can automate multiple things on a daily basis. So she can focus on something else, more talk in the business, the communication part, which is quite essential for performance to work. So automation as one key suggestion, so prescriptive kind of a thing as the second thing. Automation of some ridiculous, trivial tasks is going to be the future. I'm definitely hoping for that part to happen because people should start doing things that machines can do much, much better. So performance is going to have a very nice time in the next couple of 2-3 years.
Zorin, thanks for being our futurist in this panel, and you'll have to take the heat. But that's all we have time for today. So Zorin, Yehoshua, and Russell, thank you for joining. I hope you've had fun. It's the most important thing. And to you, thanks for viewing this episode. Stay tuned. We'll be back for more from Super Week TV at 2025. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.